There's something about the Appalachian Mountains that holds more than just fog and forest. People say it's the oldest range in North America, but some of us believe it remembers too much. A red cloth tied on a branch you never touched. A figure on the fire tower stairs that looks exactly like you. A shack that shouldn't exist, filled with photographs of people who were never supposed to return. These woods whisper. They watch. And sometimes they lead you back to places that were never on any map. From ancient cairns that cry sap, to caves that scream like they're alive, to reflections that smile before you do. These are 7 terrifying horror stories from the dark heart of the Appalachian Mountains that'll make you question every shadow, every echo, and every part of yourself you thought was real. This is High Scary Stories. Let's begin. Story 1. The Red Marker That Wasn't Mine. I was 25 the first time I went solo into the backcountry. Not just camping in a park near a road, but truly out there, the kind of woods where GPS turns into a paperweight, and the only map you can trust is the one you print and laminate yourself. I'd been hiking for years, mostly with groups, or short trips with my cousin Sam. But after a rough stretch breakup, job burnout, and the kind of quiet mental spiral that doesn't show on the outside, I just wanted to disappear for a while. Not forever. Just long enough to stop hearing my own thoughts echo in the shower. So I picked a loop trail I'd read about in an old backpacker forum. Unmaintained, unmarked, and mostly forgotten. It cut through the Blue Hollow Reserve and looped around a ridge that supposedly had great views. The original post was from 2012 and said something like, "Hard to follow, but totally worth it if you want real solitude." That was all I needed. I packed light but thorough tent, food, satellite beacon, backup water filter, and a roll of red cloth strips I used for trail marking. My plan was simple: hike in for 3 days, mark the forks and splits with red cloth and quick loops around branches, then double back along the same trail. No frills, no social media updates. Just walk, eat, sleep, breathe, repeat. The first 2 days were near perfect. Cool fall air, sun filtering through rust-colored canopies, no bugs, and the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're the only person alive. I followed the terrain closely, checking the map, marking each confusing spot with those bright red strips. Not fancy knots, just fast, single loops, just enough to be visible on the way back. I didn't see a single person. No campers, no old fire rings, no wrappers or trash. Just forest. Wild and wide and hushed. By the second night, I was sleeping deeper than I had in months. Out cold by 9 up with the birds. No stress, no phone. I felt like I'd finally put my brain in neutral. But on the morning of day 3, I found something that changed everything. A red strip of cloth, tied just like mine. But in a place I hadn't been. And it wasn't one of mine. I stood there for a long minute just staring at it. The cloth was the exact same shade as mine, deep red, cut into a fraying strip maybe 8 inches long. But the knot was different. Tighter, cleaner, tied with more intention than mine. I'd been looping mine quick and loose, just enough to hold them on a branch. This one was secured like whoever tied it expected it to stay through a storm. Worse still, it was at shoulder height, same placement I'd been using, and tied to a dead branch at the edge of the trail where I'd passed maybe an hour earlier. And I hadn't tied this. At first, I told myself I must have forgotten. Maybe I looped it there in a daze and didn't remember. But I kept a rough mental log of every turn and marker. I'd even taken a photo of a few with my phone just in case I got turned around. I scrolled through my gallery. No match. This cloth wasn't mine. Still, I didn't panic. I told myself maybe another hiker came through, maybe someone else marked the trail before me. But I hadn't seen another soul in 3 days. Not even a distant voice or the glint of a parked truck. No boot prints in the soft ground. Just me. That afternoon, the trail narrowed into a dense corridor of undergrowth. The canopy closed in, and I found myself ducking beneath low-hanging limbs more often. Every few hundred yards, I'd spot one of my original markers, same loose knot, same color, same cloth I'd prepped. I even tugged on one just to reassure myself it was mine. It came off easily. Then I saw another strip, tied tight again, in a spot I knew I hadn't touched. Same height, same cloth, but the knot was neat and practiced. I crouched beside it, scanned the ground for boot prints. Nothing, just undisturbed pine needles and a few small animal tracks. I turned, slowly scanned the trees behind me. Still nothing. By now my stomach had tightened into a knot to match the ones on the cloth. I took a sip from my bottle and kept moving, forcing myself to stay focused. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I had tied them without thinking. But that night, after I'd made camp near a bend in a dry creek bed, I double-checked the notes I'd scribbled in my field journal. I'd marked the location of each trail split and the number of cloth strips I'd used to flag them. According to my log, I should have only seen 2 markers after lunch. I saw 5, and one of them was ahead of where I'd stopped for water. Someone was either following me, or worse, leading me. I didn't eat that night. Just boiled water for tea, sat by my tent and listened. The woods were too quiet again. No frogs, no rustling. The kind of silence that feels heavy. Intentional. Like it's holding its breath with you. When I finally crawled into my tent and zipped up, I tucked the knife from my bag under my sleeping mat. Just in case. My heartbeat didn't slow until close to midnight. I told myself I was just tired. Maybe I was scaring myself. People lose track of things in the woods all the time. A couple strips of cloth weren't enough to lose my head over. Then just as I started drifting off, I heard it. Not footsteps, not twigs snapping. Something lighter, softer, the faint sound of fabric brushing bark, like someone untying a knot right outside my tent. I froze. The sound was faint like cloth being tugged slowly through bark. Delicate, precise. My breath caught in my throat, my body stiff under the sleeping bag. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. My knife was under the mat just out of reach. I counted seconds in my head. The sound didn't come again. No footsteps, no retreating branches, just silence. I waited, maybe an hour. Eventually, I convinced myself it was wind. Maybe a loose tarp corner brushing a tree. I knew it was a lie. But sometimes you need the lie more than the truth just to get through the night. I slept in a half-doze, clutching the knife now, sweat clinging to the back of my neck despite the cold. Morning broke gray and thin. The air was damp and still. I crawled out of the tent, and the first thing I did was check my closest trail marker, the one I'd tied a few hundred feet back before camp. Gone. The branch was bare, clean. The bark even looked freshly scuffed, like someone had gently twisted the fabric free. I checked the ground. Nothing. No boot prints, no drag marks, no disturbance. Just the absence of what should have been there. I packed up fast. Ate a cold granola bar as I walked. I didn't want to stop moving. Every part of my brain was on edge now. But I forced myself to stay methodical. I kept to the trail, followed the line I'd marked on the paper map folded in my pocket. Then around midday, I saw another red strip. I saw another, but this one was tied. Backward. Let me explain. When I tie my trail cloths, I always loop the left side over the right, then pull the knot down and under. It's muscle memory. The loop always falls a certain way, with a tail hanging down to the right. But this one was reversed. Right over left, tail pointing left, same height, same kind of branch. It was like someone was copying me. No, not just copying, mirroring me. I turned around tracing my steps, found another strip, reversed, then another. I reached into my pack, pulled out my map. Something gnawed at me, some deep unease I couldn't explain. That's when I noticed it. The way I'd drawn the loop, the whole path on the map. It was curving the wrong direction. I stared at it, heart thudding. My original loop, the one I plotted before leaving, was supposed to curl clockwise. It was a mental safeguard, something I used to orient myself. But the turns I'd been taking these last 2 days, they didn't line up. Somehow the trail had reversed itself. Or I had. Either way, I was walking in the opposite direction of my original plan, and I had no idea when it had happened. The trail markers, the ones tied with mirrored knots, they weren't random. They were a path. Leading me. I stood in the middle of the trail map, fluttering in my hand, breathing hard. I hadn't taken a wrong turn, I was certain. Every split, every rise and bend, I remembered them. But somehow, I was walking a mirrored version of the path I'd planned. A flipped loop, a shadow trail, and the markers, the red strips tied with perfect mirrored knots. They weren't mistakes. They weren't mine. Someone else had been walking this trail, matching me, reversing me, leading me somewhere I hadn't intended to go. By late afternoon, I stopped marking anything. I didn't want to leave a trail for whoever or whatever was behind me. The forest felt tighter. The trees leaned closer together like they were closing in. Shadows fell earlier than they should have. The silence got louder. I kept walking. At dusk, I hit a clearing I didn't recognize. It wasn't marked on my map, and it didn't make sense geographically. I should have been looping north by now. But this place was flat open and completely wrong. And in the center, nailed to the side of a rotting pine, was a map. My map. The same copy I kept in my pocket. Same creases. Same red loop drawn in pen. But this one had extra markings. Lines sketched in dark graphite curling backward through the loop. And at the center of the spiral, near a jagged X, were 5 words written in blocky, hard pressure: "You are going the right way." I didn't remember writing that. Didn't make sense. My fingers went numb. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my map, the one I'd folded, checked, updated with notes. Blank. The loop was gone. The red line, the compass marks, all faded. Just a sheet of topography and rivers and empty paper. I looked up. There were red strips tied to every tree in the clearing. Dozens, maybe more. All tied with mirrored knots, tails pointing left. Some were stained, some darker than others. And hanging from one right above my head was a strip that still looked wet. I reached up before I could stop myself. It was warm, sticky. I dropped it and stepped back. Then I heard footsteps. Not behind me, ahead, and they were my footsteps. Exactly. Same weight, same rhythm, same pace. I froze, listened. They stopped when I stopped. I took a step to the left. The sound mirrored me. One step, crunch of leaves. Exact. I turned slowly. Across the clearing, just at the edge of the tree line, someone was standing. Same pack, same boots, same posture, same jacket. I couldn't see the face. It was cast in shadow. But they raised one hand and waved, not a casual wave, not a hello, a synchronized wave, like a reflection in glass. My breath caught. Then they took a step toward me. I ran. I don't remember how long, just that it got darker fast. My legs burned, My lungs scraped the inside of my ribs. I didn't stop until I saw a crooked wooden sign half swallowed by moss. It wasn't the trailhead. It was a name I didn't recognize. A place not on any map, but it was an exit, or at least it was a way. I staggered onto gravel knees, buckling, and collapsed beside my car. The doors were locked just like I'd left them, the windows fogged from the inside. I drove all night. When I got home, I opened my pack and dumped everything onto the floor. The red cloth roll, the one I brought, was untouched. Every strip still neatly wound. All of them. Every single one. Untied, unused. I've never gone back. But sometimes I wake up to find a red cloth tied to the fence outside my apartment. Always on the left, always pointing inward. I changed apartments 6 months later. Didn't tell anyone why. Didn't break the lease. Didn't explain to the landlord why I refused the unit with the balcony. Just paid the fee, took the loss, and moved across town to a place with no trees. No view. Nowhere for cloth to be tied. I burned the map. I shredded the roll of red strips. I stopped hiking. But the dreams never left. Sometimes I wake up sweating, and I swear I can still feel that sticky warmth on my fingertips. Not blood. Not sap. Something older. Something wrong. One night, about a year after I got back, I heard a knock at my front door. 3 soft taps. I live on the 3rd floor. No buzzer, no package notice. Just 3 taps and silence. When I finally worked up the nerve to check the peephole, no one was there. But on the doorknob, tied with a clean mirrored knot, was a strip of red cloth, tail pointing left. I don't hike anymore, but every time I pass a trailhead, I feel something shift, like the path remembers me, like it's waiting, like some mirrored version of me is still out there walking the other way. And every once in a while, in the dead of night, I'll hear footsteps on the stairs outside my window, matching mine, step for step. Story 2. The Fire Tower Visitor. The fire tower had been our tradition since we were 13. Me and Aaron, 2 scrawny kids from a nothing town in western North Carolina, just trying to escape the noise of our homes. His parents fought. Mine drank. We'd sneak out with sandwiches, a flashlight, and a couple cans of soda and hike the ridge trail until our legs ached. At the top stood the old forestry lookout, abandoned for decades. No cameras, no fences. Just a rusting staircase that groaned under your feet and a view that felt bigger than the world we came from. We went every summer until college scattered us. He moved to Colorado. I stayed local, got a job I hated, and eventually just stopped checking my phone when it buzzed. But life has a way of dragging old ghosts back, and last fall, after Aaron's dad passed, he called me out of nowhere. "Let's do the tower again," he said. He didn't sound nostalgic, just tired. So we planned it. 2 nights, just like the old days. Only this time we'd bring real gear. Sleeping bags, a burner stove, whiskey. No girls, no distractions. Just the 2 of us, 30 years old, and pretending we still belonged to the woods like we did back then. The hike was longer than I remembered, steeper, more overgrown. But when we reached the clearing, the tower still stood like a skeleton against the dusk sky. Its paint was mostly gone and rust had claimed most of the frame. But it was there, waiting. We climbed. The cabin at the top creaked like it might collapse. But the view was still magic. You could see the whole valley, the curling river, the empty roads, trees for miles, black and gold under the setting sun. We drank, talked, watched stars come out one by one. That night, as we zipped our bags and laid back under the warped wooden roof, I remember Aaron saying, "You ever think something else remembers this place too?" I laughed. But hours later, I woke up to footsteps circling the tower. Heavy, measured, and Aaron was still fast asleep beside me. At first, I thought I was dreaming. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, moving around the metal grating at the tower's base. You know the sound steel makes when it shifts under weight, that hollow ping and creak. That's what I heard just once, followed by silence, then another step, then another. I sat up slowly in my bag, listening. The air inside the cabin was ice cold, though we'd zipped it up before bed. Breath came out in faint clouds, and Aaron was still curled in his sleeping bag. Mouth slightly open, breathing steady. I leaned toward the broken window frame and peered down. Nothing. Just moonlight on the clearing, the long shadows of tree trunks, and a slice of empty trail beyond the brush. But I knew what I'd heard. Not an animal, not wind. I've camped enough to tell the difference. These were footsteps, human ones. After a few minutes, they stopped. I waited in silence until the sun cracked the horizon. Aaron didn't stir until mid-morning. I didn't mention the sounds. Didn't want to sound paranoid. We ate protein bars, brewed gritty instant coffee over a whisper stove, and spent most of the day hiking out to the overlook just beyond the southern ridge. It was beautiful, peaceful, almost enough to make me forget what I'd heard. That night, we built a small fire at the base of the tower. It wasn't technically legal, but we were careful. Stacked stones cleared the brush. We sat close, passing the bottle back and forth, talking about everything and nothing, old girlfriends, broken jobs, what we thought life would be by now. Aaron was quiet most of the time. He kept glancing into the trees like he was waiting for something to come out. You ever hear stories about this place? He asked suddenly. What kind of stories? He shrugged. Stuff. Weird sounds. Things showing up on the stairs. I shook my head. Never heard anything. Aaron took a long pull from the bottle. I think my dad came up here once, years ago, before he got bad. He didn't say more. We put the fire out before midnight and climbed the tower again. The air had that strange static chill, like it was holding tension just under the skin of the night. I wrapped myself tighter in my bag and drifted into shallow sleep. And then I heard it again. But this time, it was on the stairs. Slow, rhythmic. One creak, pause, another creak, closer. I froze. The steps were deliberate, almost too deliberate. Like whoever or whatever was climbing had practiced walking quietly, but wanted just enough sound to be heard. I turned to wake Aaron. He wasn't there. His sleeping bag was empty, half-zipped, still warm. I scrambled out of my bag, heart slamming against my ribs. The footsteps had stopped. No more creaks, no more movement. Just that awful silence again, like the whole forest was listening. Aaron, I whispered. Nothing. I crept to the hatch that led to the metal stairs. Still latched, still shut. If someone or something had climbed up, they hadn't come through here. But Aaron was gone, and his pack was still lying beside mine unopened. His boots were missing too. I opened the hatch slowly, carefully. Moonlight bathed the metal staircase in silver. No one there. I scanned the clearing below. Still empty. Trees still. The only sound was the wind threading through the beams of the old tower. Then I noticed something. One of the fire tower's support columns near the bottom had a dark smear trailing up it, almost like something had been dragged along the steel. I couldn't tell if it was mud ash or something else. I descended. The steps groaned louder than before, even under my careful weight. When I reached the clearing, I stepped into something cold. A boot print, Aaron's, still fresh, leading into the woods. Only there was just one. The trail of prints didn't pair up. No left-right walking pattern, just one boot, over and over again, as if he'd been hopping, or worse, dragged. I followed it. About 10 feet into the brush, the print stopped, just ended. No more crushed leaves, no disturbed earth. And there, nailed to a tree, was Aaron's other boot, hung upside down, with something stuffed inside. It was a photograph, old sun-bleached, creased like it had been folded and unfolded 1,000 times. I pulled it out slowly. It was a picture of the tower. From the outside, taken from the trail at dusk, 2 figures stood at the top. One was unmistakably Aaron. The other looked like me. But I hadn't taken that picture, and we hadn't posed for anything like it. I flipped the photo over. Something was scrawled on the back in faded pencil. Same time every year. He always comes down. You always stay. My breath caught. The forest suddenly felt smaller. The trees closer, like they leaned in. I turned and ran. Climbed the stairs 2 at a time, slammed the hatch shut behind me. But when I turned to grab my pack, it wasn't there. None of it was. Just one sleeping bag and a photograph of me, standing alone at the top of the tower. I don't know how long I stood there just staring at that photo. The image was grainy, but it was me. The same clothes, same posture, same tired, confused look I had that very moment. And behind me in the photo, the sky was just beginning to turn the deep violet of dawn, exactly like it was now. But I hadn't posed for that photo. No one had taken it. Aaron was gone. Unless he wasn't. Unless I was. I backed toward the far corner of the tower cabin chest, tightening. My sleeping bag was gone. My gear. Everything. The only thing left besides the photo was the faint scent of pine smoke and the distant echo of something metallic rattling in the wind. I threw open the hatch and stared down. There was someone on the stairs. But they weren't moving, just standing, facing up. Their face hidden in shadow, and their shoulders slightly hunched like they'd been climbing forever and finally decided to rest. One hand clutched the railing, the other hung limp at their side. I called out something between a shout and a plea. Aaron. The figure tilted its head, slowly, deliberately, but didn't answer. I slammed the hatch closed and backed away. My pulse was hammering. My thoughts were spiraling. Something was wrong with time here, with memory, with me. Then I saw movement, not outside, inside. On the opposite wall of the tower, something was shifting, rippling, a reflection, but not from glass. It was me, but not me. I stepped forward and watched as the figure mimicked every move, every breath. Except the reflection wasn't reversed. It was delayed by maybe half a second. I'd raise my hand, and then it would. I'd exhale, and then it would. Like it was remembering what I was doing, or replaying it. Then the wind picked up. Hard, sudden. The entire tower groaned as if it might break from the strain. The hatch at my feet rattled violently, then burst open. The figure on the stairs was gone. I backed toward the far corner again, heart crashing against my ribs. That's when I heard the footsteps right behind me. I turned, but no one was there. Only a boot, Aaron's, standing upright in the corner like someone had placed it there waiting. And inside, it was another photograph. This one was of me again. Only now I was alone in the woods, not at the tower, just standing in the brush looking straight at the camera. Behind me the tower was collapsing, mid-fall, frame twisting, roof breaking. The photo had a timestamp. Tomorrow, 3:27 a.m. I felt the world tilt beneath me. This tower wasn't safe. It wasn't just a memory. It was waiting for something, and it had chosen me. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I sat in the corner of the tower cabin, eyes fixed on the photo, trying not to look at the boot still standing beside me. Every creak of the wind, every groan of the rusting beams felt louder now, less like the woods, more like breath held between teeth. Like something was waiting for the clock to tick over. 3:27 a.m. I checked my watch every few minutes. Each time it inched closer. At 3:19, I heard footsteps again. Soft at first, then heavier, like someone gaining confidence with each step. I pressed myself against the wall, heart stuttering, muscles locked. The hatch was still open. I stared at it, but no one came through. Not yet. Instead, I heard a voice. Faint, familiar. Aaron. It wasn't calling out. It was mimicking. It said his name the same way I had. Then it said mine. Not like a person would. Like a memory would. Like something that had heard us speak and was now practicing. The sky outside shifted from violet to a dirty pre-dawn gray. I grabbed the photo and stepped out onto the landing. Cold air hit my face. The metal rail bit into my palm. I looked out at the forest, endless, black and silent. And there, at the tree line, stood a figure, motionless, watching, too far to make out details. But I knew. It was wearing my jacket. It lifted one arm slowly and pointed at the tower. Then it turned and disappeared into the woods. I never saw Aaron again. But every year around the same week, I get a new photo in the mail. No return address, no note. Just me, alone, standing at the top of the tower, looking down. Story 3. My uncle said don't go west. My uncle never gave advice unless you asked for it. He was the kind of man who kept his words tight and his stories even tighter unless there was a storm rolling in or a second glass of whiskey in his hand. He'd been a ranger back in the 70s working the borderlands between Kentucky and Tennessee. Claimed to know the hollers like the veins on the back of his hand. But he only ever warned me about one thing. Don't go west of Rocking Branch after dusk, he said. If the sun's past the treetops, you turn your ass around. I was 17 when he told me that sitting on his porch during a summer break, I barely remember. He didn't elaborate, just spit into a can, stared into the tree line like it owed him something, and repeated it one more time before going quiet for the rest of the night. Years passed. He died the winter after I graduated college. Left me his old cabin out near Laurel Ridge and a half-destroyed map tucked in a copy of the Foxfire book. The ink had bled from water damage, but I could still make out his blocky handwriting across the top. Trust the old roads. Avoid the new ones. The cabin wasn't much, 2 rooms, a stone chimney, and a floor that leaned so hard to the left I had to wedge furniture against the walls to keep them steady. But it was mine. And after 6 months of city living and a failed engagement, I needed quiet. I moved in that spring, telling myself I'd stay for a couple months. Clear my head, do some hiking, get back to the dirt and trees that raised me. It was on the 2nd week late in the day when I saw the trail. It split west off an old hunting road, one that didn't show up on any Park Service map, but was clearly used. Fresh boot prints. Recent break in the brush. I stood at the fork's sun just starting to fall below the canopy and heard my uncle's voice in my head, "Don't go west after dusk." So naturally I did, and I wish to God I hadn't. The trail was narrower than it should have been. Not overgrown, just reluctant, like the forest hadn't fully agreed to let it exist. Ferns curled tight along the edges, and the trees leaned in low enough that I had to duck every few steps. The boot prints I'd seen at the split continued a short while before fading into dry leaves, swallowed by time or something else. The first thing I noticed was the air. It changed fast. One second it was normal spring mountain air, pine sweet and full of birdsong. The next, everything went flat. Still, like stepping behind a pane of glass. No birds, no bugs. Just the sound of my own breath way too loud in my ears. Still, I kept going. Maybe half a mile in, I found the clearing. It was perfect. Too perfect. A circle of moss-covered stones surrounded by trees that looked older than the state itself. No brush, no deadfall, just that wide-open patch of grass like something had pressed the forest flat. In the center stood a wooden post, waist-high, splintered and cracked. I thought it might have been a property marker or some leftover from old logging days until I saw the leather strap bolted to the top, worn smooth, shackled. I didn't touch it. Didn't step into the clearing either. My body knew what my mind hadn't caught up to yet. This place didn't want me here. That's when I heard the voice. Faint, female, humming, not singing, humming. Like a lullaby barely carried by the wind. It came from deeper in the trees beyond the clearing, just on the edge of hearing like the forest was offering it without really letting it go. I called out. Nothing answered. The air got colder, damp. My arms broke out in goosebumps. I turned to leave, just walk away, be smart for once. But the trail behind me wasn't the same. The bend I'd followed on the way in now forked left and right, both unfamiliar. The tree with the snapped limb I'd marked mentally gone. No fallen branch, no landmark. Panic sat on my chest like a stone. I picked the left fork, hiked fast, nearly jogging. Branches scratched at my arms. The light had shifted again, grayer now, like dusk had sprinted past reason. That's when I saw the second post. Same height, same wood, same strap, only this one had something tied to it. A shirt, faded blue, torn, looked old, like denim worn thin from sun and rain. And I recognized it. It was my uncle's. I stood frozen, staring at the shirt. It hung limp from the leather strap as if someone had placed it there deliberately, not tossed, not blown by wind, but displayed. A warning. Or maybe an offering. I stepped closer. The fabric was frayed but intact, except for a series of deep, parallel slashes along the back. Not knife marks, more like clawed. 3 even tears as if something had raked across the spine again and again. I reached out and touched it. Still damp, not from rain. There hadn't been rain in days. I wanted to scream, to run, to call someone, anyone, but no one would hear me. Cell service out here was a rumor, and even if I made it back to the road, I'd have to explain why I ignored the one piece of advice my uncle ever gave me. I looked around trying to get my bearings when I noticed something that hadn't been there before. A path. Not the one I'd come down, something else. Narrower, deeper. And at the end of it, just barely visible between the trees, was a cabin. No, not a cabin. A shack, crooked, slumped, made of old boards and a rusting tin roof that had nearly peeled in half. One corner sank into the ground like the earth was swallowing it. I should have turned back. I should have run. But something in me, something buried and old, pulled me toward it. I stepped off the trail. The ground beneath my boots changed. Softer. Not quite mud, but not soil either. Like I was walking on sponge or rot. The air pressed heavier around me. The smell hit next wet iron mold, and something that might have once been sweet. When I reached the shack, I noticed the door was already cracked open. Inside it was dark, but not empty. There was a chair in the center of the room. One wooden chair. And someone was sitting in it. Back facing me. Gray hair, familiar posture. I knew it before I let myself say it, my uncle. Or something that looked like him. I stepped forward, slow and quiet, until I was close enough to see his shoulders rising and falling, still breathing. "Uncle Rick," I whispered. No answer. Then so fast I nearly stumbled, he stood. But he didn't turn. He walked toward the far wall where there hadn't been a door before, and passed straight through it. I blinked. Gone. The room went cold. My breath fogged in front of me. And that's when I saw the photos. Pasted across the wall, dozens of them. All taken in this part of the forest. All people I didn't recognize. Except one. A photo of me. Standing at the edge of the clearing. From this morning. I stood there, heart slamming against my ribs, staring at that photo of myself. The angle was impossible, taken from behind, over my left shoulder facing the clearing. Same clothes, same posture. Even the same tilt of my head as I debated whether to step forward. But I'd been alone. Hadn't I? I reached for the picture, but the wall behind it wasn't wood anymore. It was bark. Rough, living bark. The entire interior of the shack had changed. The floor beneath my boots was no longer wood-damp moss, now covered every inch. The air smelled thicker, deeper, like the breath of something buried. My hands started shaking. Not from fear now. From recognition. This place wasn't just wrong. It remembered me. I turned to leave, but the door I came through had vanished. There was only one exit now, through the spot where my uncle had disappeared. I stepped forward, and the wall opened. No door, no frame. Just folded inward like it was inhaling me. On the other side was the same forest, but wrong. The sky was too dark for the time of day. The trees were too still, too symmetrical. The air buzzed faintly, not with insects, but with a hum of something vast and watching. And the photos, those dozens of faces on the walls, they were now hanging from the trees. Some nailed into bark, some tied by twine, all of them watching. I moved quickly, branches tugging at my clothes, the forest reshaping behind me with every step. Nothing led where it should. I'd turn around and the path would be gone, replaced by new ones split in angles no trail ever should. Then ahead, I saw him again. My uncle. Standing in a clearing just like the first, arms outstretched, head tilted skyward, and around him others. People. Still. Silent. Faces hidden by long hair dirt masks made of bark. All of them facing outward, like sentinels, like they were waiting for someone. I stepped closer, and my uncle turned. His eyes weren't right. Not blind, not empty, just borrowed. Like he was seeing through a window that didn't belong to him. He opened his mouth and my voice came out. "Don't go west after dusk." Then the sky ripped. A soundless break in the world above, like lightning without light thunder, without noise. All the trees bent inward. The figures around him dropped to their knees, and the ground beneath me gave way. I fell, not down, but through. Through layers of forest, through time, through memory that wasn't mine. Past shadows of things I almost recognized, faces in windows, whispered warnings, names I didn't know, but somehow carried with me. Then silence, darkness, stillness, and I was back. Standing alone in my uncle's cabin, at sunrise, no dirt on my boots, no photos in my pocket, just a single item sitting on the table, my uncle's map, the one I'd found weeks ago. Only now the western half was burned away, and written in the ash-smudged margin were 5 fresh words in that same blocky handwriting. "This time you stayed too long." I didn't move for a long time. Just stood there staring at the table. At the map. At the 5 words scorched into its edge like a final warning. "This time you stayed too long." Not "you shouldn't have gone." Not you weren't supposed to see, just you stayed too long. Like everything before this moment had been permitted barely, tolerated, observed. But I'd crossed some line I hadn't seen. Tried to leave the cabin that morning, packed my bag in silence, locked the door out of habit, hiked back to my car with legs that didn't feel like mine. Everything looked the same. But it wasn't. The roads felt longer. The landmarks too familiar, like they were repeating. At one point, I passed the same mile marker 3 times. No one else on the road, no other cars, just trees pressing in tighter with every turn. When I finally reached the highway, my phone buzzed back to life. 17 missed calls, 5 voicemails, all from numbers I didn't recognize. No names. Just voices asking questions in tones that sounded almost human. I changed my number the next week. I moved out of the cabin, left everything behind Gear Maps photos. Sold the property to a man from Ohio who said he liked remote places. I never warned him. I don't think I could have explained it if I tried. But some nights, usually around the same week in spring, I wake up at 3:27 a.m., always the same time. And there's a photo waiting on my doorstep. Same black and white style. Same brittle paper. And every time the image is different. But I'm always there. Standing just west of Rocking Branch. Looking back. Like I'm still there. Or never really left. Story 4. Who left the handprints? I was 9 years old the first time I saw them. Handprints. Tiny, smudged, perfectly spaced, like a child had pressed their palms flat against the inside of the window and dragged them down slowly. They showed up on the guest bedroom glass the morning after the first frost. I remember because it was cold enough that my breath hung in the air like smoke when I ran to tell my mom. She brushed it off at first, said it was condensation. Maybe I'd touched the window the night before and forgot. But I hadn't. I wasn't allowed in that room after dark. None of us were. It was the only room in the house that stayed locked even during the day. My grandmother had rules, strange ones. No whistling indoors, no mirrors facing windows, and never ever leave the guest room door open after sundown. It used to scare me the way she'd say it, calm but absolute, like someone reading instructions off a bomb. My cousins and I joked about it when we were older, daring each other to peek inside after bedtime. None of us ever did. Until the summer she passed. After the funeral, my family stayed in her house while arrangements were sorted. I was 16 then, old enough to pretend I didn't believe in old stories or whispered warnings. That night, while everyone slept, I slipped the key from the hallway hook and opened the door. It was just a room, plain, dusty, quiet. But the air was heavy in a way I can't explain. Not humid heavy, like it had a weight of its own. I stepped inside, stood by the window, and waited for something, anything to happen. Nothing did. I laughed to myself, shut the door, and went back to bed. But the next morning, the handprints were back. Lower this time, smaller, and on the inside of the glass. I wiped the glass with the sleeve of my hoodie, half expecting the prints to smear away like normal condensation. But they didn't. They stayed. Perfect, sharp-edged, like oil or something sticky had formed them. Each finger was too long, too narrow, with the spacing of a child's hand, but wrong somehow, like the proportions had been guessed at by someone who'd never actually seen a child. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. I told myself it was a trick of temperature, a residue left over from the night before. That's what logic wanted me to believe. But that night, I left a paper towel taped to the inside of the window, just to be sure. The next morning, it was gone. And in its place, more handprints. Now there were 4. lower on the glass like someone had crouched beneath the frame and dragged their hands up and down slowly, repetitively. I ran my fingers across the glass. There was no moisture, no heat. The window was cold to the touch, and the prints were etched so faintly I had to angle my head to see them clearly. I showed my cousin Eli. He stared at them a long time before saying anything. Then he looked at the lock on the door, checked it, twisted the knob once, twice. "Did you go in again?" he asked, but not accusing, more like worried. I told him yes. He nodded like that was the answer he expected. Then he told me something I didn't know. My mom used to hear scratching in there when she was a kid. She said sometimes in the middle of the night she'd hear tapping from the window, like fingernails, always 3 times. Then it'd stop. And if she looked in the morning, there'd be prints. I asked if it ever happened to him. He shook his head. "Only the girls," he said. "Only the ones who go inside." That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every groan of the pipes felt louder than usual. Like the silence was being held back by something thin, something stretched too tight. Just after 3 a.m. I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. 3 quick knocks. I shot upright, listened. Nothing after that. But I knew. I pulled the blanket over my head and stayed like that until the sun rose. When I finally got the courage to go look, the guest room door was cracked open. And on the glass, there were now 6 prints. 2 larger, 4 small. Like something had brought a friend. I didn't tell anyone the door had opened on its own. Didn't tell them about the tapping either. About the feeling I had when I stood in front of the glass, that feeling like I was being watched, not from outside, but from behind the reflection, from inside the glass itself. By then, even Eli didn't want to talk about it. I caught him looking at the window, one's lips moving like he was praying under his breath. When I asked what he was saying, he just muttered, "It's best not to name things." That day, I went digging through my grandmother's old trunk in the attic. Dusty photo albums, a box of church programs, some Polaroids from the late 60s, and buried at the bottom, a worn red notebook, leather-bound, and cracked with age. Her handwriting was sharp, small, and precise. The first half was filled with recipes, canning instructions, notes about plants and tinctures. The second half wasn't. It started with a single sentence on a blank page. "The child in the window has no name." After that, it was all entries, scattered dates, descriptions of dreams of children's laughter at odd hours of reflections that blinked out of sync. My grandmother mentioned the guest room again and again. Said the glass held memories it had no right to keep. That the prints only came back after the funeral of her sister June, the sister who died in that room at age 9. No one had ever told me that. I turned the page and saw something that made my stomach twist. A drawing. Simple. Pencil on paper. But unmistakable. 6 handprints. 4 small, 2 large. All pressed into the same pane of glass. The caption beneath it read, "When there are 6, they are no longer looking in. They are looking out." That night, I tried to stay awake. Told myself I'd catch them. Finally see what was happening. I lasted until just after 3. The tapping woke me. Not on the window, on the mirror. Soft, deliberate, like someone testing the boundary. I sat up slowly and turned my head. The hallway mirror across from my bedroom door was fogged. On the glass, 6 prints. I got up barefoot, walked slowly toward it. My own reflection stared back pale and tired, but behind me in the dim hallway, something else moved. I turned. No one there. I looked back at the mirror, and one of the prints was fading. as if whoever had made it was no longer behind the glass. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat on the floor across from the hallway, mirror blanket around my shoulders, phone in hand, with the flashlight off, just watching. Every creak in the house made me flinch. Every whisper of wind outside felt deliberate. But nothing else happened, until just before dawn. That's when the mirror cracked, a thin hairline fracture running top to bottom so faint I wouldn't have noticed it if I hadn't been staring directly at it. There was no sound, no shatter, just a slow, steady line splitting the reflection down the center, like whatever had been pressing against it had finally leaned a little too hard. I backed away and left it alone. When morning came, I asked my mom casually if anyone else in the family had ever seen the handprints. She went quiet, real quiet. Then she said something I still don't know how to unpack. Your Aunt June used to talk about a girl she saw in the window. Said she had long hair and no eyes, just black where they should be. But your grandma told her not to speak about it. Said if you talked about it, it remembered you. I didn't press her. I didn't have to. I knew what I had to do. That evening, just before the sun went down, I unlocked the guest room again. Stepped inside with my grandmother's red notebook in one hand and a small silver hand mirror in the other. The air inside was worse now, thick, sour like damp wood and old breath. The window waited, still, untouched. No prints this time. But I didn't need them. I placed the notebook on the windowsill, flipped it to the page with the drawing. 6 prints. That same chilling caption. I raised the mirror to reflect the window just like one of her notes had instructed. And I saw them. Not in the room, not in the mirror, but in the reflection of the reflection. 6 shadows. Hunched. Crawling. Palms pressed against the inside of the glass like they were under ice. They weren't shaped right. Too thin. Joints bent wrong. And their heads turned slowly toward me, one by one. And then they smiled, mouths stretching in silence. And I swear to God, one of them had my face. I dropped the mirror. It shattered. In that instant, the air snapped. The window burst outward, glass exploding into the yard, like something had pushed from inside. The lights in the hallway flickered and died. I heard footsteps bare fast, slapping across the floorboards toward the back of the house. Then silence. I stood alone, breathing like I'd run for miles. On the wall behind me, in faint, greasy smears, 6 handprints. This time not on glass, on drywall. I scrubbed the wall until my knuckles bled. Bleach, paint thinner, soap, nothing worked. The handprints remained faint, but undeniable, and their oily outlines slowly redarkening as the day went on. Like the wall itself remembered. I left that night. Didn't pack, didn't call anyone. I drove 5 hours in silence to a friend's apartment 2 states away and slept on their floor for a week. When I finally worked up the courage to talk about it, I started by asking them a question I never thought I'd ask seriously. If you saw something in a reflection, something that looked like you but felt wrong, would you tell anyone? They didn't answer. They just stared at me like they already knew what I meant. Eventually, my mom sold the house. Said she couldn't stay there after Grandma was gone. Said it never felt like home again. I didn't argue. I didn't go back. But that didn't stop it. A year later, I was living in a second-floor apartment with no yard, no woods, no history. I was doing laundry when I heard a knock, 3 soft taps on the bathroom mirror. There was no one else home. When I checked, nothing was there, except a single handprint, tiny, greasy, dead center of the glass. I wiped it off without thinking. But it came back the next day, Now they appear once a month. First one, then two, then more. Always in mirrors. Sometimes windows. Never when anyone else is watching. Last week I woke to find 6. And in the center of them, scrawled in breath-fogged letters, "You let us out." So now I keep my mirrors covered. I never stay anywhere too long. And I never ever look too long at my own reflection. Because if I do, sometimes I see them smile back. Story 5. The Cairn that cried sap. I first heard about the Cairn when I was 7. My granddad used to warn us about it the way some folks talk about poison ivy or copperheads, common enough to be real rare enough you hoped you'd never stumble on one. If you see a stack of stones out in the woods, he'd say, "Don't touch it. Don't look at it too long. And for the love of God, don't knock it down." Back then, I thought he was just being dramatic. He had that old Appalachian way of speaking half folklore, half fire and brimstone. But what made me remember his warning wasn't the words. It was the way his voice would get tight, like something in his memory clenched too hard when he talked about it. "It cries sap," he once told me, "thick and slow like blood that forgot how to die." If you ever see one doing that, leave it be. There's things out there that mark their grief in stone. He never explained what that meant. And I didn't ask. The woods behind our family's land stretched for miles, thick with pine maple and oak. We used to play back there as kids, building forts out of branches and pretending we were lost explorers. The rules were simple: stay where the trail stays brown, don't go past the creek, and if you find the cairn, run. None of us ever saw it. Not really. There were whispers. A friend of my cousin swore he spotted it once, near a grove of pines, said it wasn't just rocks, it had twigs and teeth embedded between the stones. Another kid claimed he heard it weeping at night when he camped too close to the ridge. But no one ever had proof. It became a kind of dare, a local legend we dared each other to believe. And then, years later, after I'd moved out after college, after my granddad passed, I came back to clean out his cabin. And I found a map, hand-drawn, faded. Marked in red ink was a single word beside a crude sketch of stacked stones, weeping, and something about that word made my blood run cold. I don't know why I followed the map. Maybe it was grief or boredom or something else, something quieter. A tug just beneath the surface. Like an old story I didn't know I'd been part of my whole life, waiting to pull me in. The trail was mostly gone. Just a faint path beneath pine needles and moss. It led away from the cabin, past the old well, and over the creek we used to throw rocks into as kids. The farther I went, the more the woods changed. The air got cooler, thicker. Not dark exactly, but muted. As if the forest were holding its breath. About an hour in, I found the first sign. Not the cairn. Not yet. But sap. Thick streaks of amber glistening down the side of a tree, not leaking from a branch, but oozing straight from the trunk in a single deliberate vertical line. It looked fresh. I touched it. It was warm. I wiped it on my jeans and kept walking. Further up the ridge, I found more trees with the same marks. Some with 2 lines, one with 4. All of them bleeding sap that smelled too sweet, almost metallic. I took out my phone to snap a photo, but the screen flickered and died the second I opened the camera. Battery full, phone brand new. Still, nothing. So I moved on. And then, without warning, I stepped into silence. I hadn't realized how loud the woods had been, birds, bugs, breeze, but suddenly there was nothing, not even the sound of my own footsteps. The kind of silence that felt like you walked into a room someone else had just left. That's when I saw it. The cairn. 3 feet tall, 7 stones. No carvings, no symbols. Just a stack of rounded rocks, smooth and damp like river stones, but there was no river nearby. What caught my eye, though, was what lay beside it. A circle of sap, not splattered, not dripped. A perfect ring, pooled and glistening in the underbrush like something had cried in a spiral. I took a step closer, and something cracked beneath my boot. I looked down. It wasn't a branch. It was a bone. Small, clean, child-sized. I froze. My breath caught. The cairn made a sound then, a soft pop like a bubble bursting. And from between the stones, a single droplet of sap oozed free, thicker than any I'd seen. It dripped down slow, pausing at the third rock from the top, then dropped to the forest floor with a wet tap. I don't know why I whispered hello, but the moment I did, the wind picked up behind me. Not a breeze, a rush, like something moving fast toward me. I spun around. Nothing. When I turned back, the cairn had changed. The top stone was missing, and on the ground, right where the sap had pooled, sat a new stone, still wet, still crying. I backed away slowly. The new stone glistened as if it had just been pulled from a river, slick warm, almost breathing. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat, a rhythm out of sync with the quiet around me. And then I noticed something etched into it. Faint but unmistakable, a symbol. A triangle inside a circle, a shape I had seen before. On my grandfather's old belt buckle. It hit me like a gut punch. That symbol he used to trace it absently when he told his stories. Used to carve it into fence posts when he thought no one was watching. I always figured it was just a doodle, some Appalachian flourish passed down from old-timers. But now it was here, on a freshly placed stone in the middle of the forest, like a signature. Like a message meant only for someone who'd recognize it. I knelt cautiously. The sap had started to seep into the dirt, staining it the color of dried blood. And beneath the cairn, half buried in the loam, I saw something else, an old tin tag. Like a dog tag, but hand-stamped. I dug it out with shaking fingers. The name on it read, M.K. Langston. My grandfather's name. I stared at it for what felt like hours. My mind replayed every cryptic warning he'd ever muttered, every half-finished sentence about what lives in the quiet and what doesn't forget. He hadn't been warning us in general. He'd been warning me. This wasn't just some forest oddity. It was a grave, a shrine, a tether. Something had been left unfinished. And now it was waking up. As I stood, the trees shifted around me, not visibly, but spiritually, like something ancient had stirred beneath the roots. The ground beneath my feet felt unsteady, almost pulsing. The cairn wasn't just a place of mourning. It was a boundary, a door. And someone, maybe even my grandfather, had sealed something behind it. But now the seal was weakening. Back at the cabin, I dug through his things again, found his old hunting journal. Most of it was mundane deer tracks, trail markers, weather notes. But toward the back, there were pages torn out, except one. That last page had just 3 lines. The sap runs thicker when it remembers. 7 stones, never more, never fewer. If one is removed, another must take its place. I felt sick. The missing top stone, the new one at the base. I hadn't taken anything, but something had shifted while I was there. Something had rearranged itself. And if the cairn had marked me, that meant I had already taken my place. The wind started howling that night. Not outside, the kind that slips under doors, groans through rafters, rattles old glass. But inside me, I couldn't sleep. couldn't sit still. The moment I closed my eyes, I saw the cairn again. Not in daylight, but in moonlight, surrounded by moving figures. Long-limbed silhouettes dripping sap from their eyes, pressing against me with empty faces. When I finally bolted upright, I wasn't in bed. I was outside, barefoot, pajamas soaked with morning dew. Standing at the edge of the woods, breathing like I'd run the whole way. And there, just 10 feet ahead, it was waiting. The cairn. Only it wasn't where I'd found it yesterday. It was closer. Smaller now, 5 stones instead of 6. And the pool of sap was larger, blacker, as if it had been crying through the night. I stumbled backward. Tried to turn, but I felt the earth pull at me. Like the trees weren't letting go. The whole forest had turned inward, watching. Waiting. I ran. Back to the cabin, hands shaking as I shoved furniture against the doors closed. Every curtain smashed the mirror in the hallway. I felt like a hunted animal cornered not by something I could see, but by something I understood too late. That night the crying began. Not outside the window, from beneath the floorboards. It was soft at first, a low weeping sound, thicker than a voice, wet, as though someone were mourning in molasses. I pressed my ear to the wood and almost screamed because I didn't hear one voice. I heard 7, and one of them was my grandfather, whispering my name, begging me not to answer. But I did. I whispered, "What do you want?" The house went still. Then crack. A sharp sound from the back room. I ran toward it, heart in my throat. The guest room floor had split open in the center. Just a hairline gap, but from it seeped that same sap, slow, thick, and deliberate, like it was being forced from a wound. And in the center of the room, resting neatly on the floorboards, was a stone. The same stone with a triangle and circle. Only now it had a smear of blood across its face. My blood. I must have scratched myself running through the trees. Or maybe something had marked me without me realizing. But that blood, it meant something. It sealed something. The realization hit me like a fist. The cairn was feeding off memory, off legacy. The crying was grief it couldn't release, because the ones who remembered it were all gone. Except me. I was the last Langston who knew, and now I was marked to remember forever. Unless I gave it something new. A new name, a new mourner, or a new stone. And I knew in that moment what had happened to my grandfather. Why no one found a grave. Why the cairn had grown silent for years until now. He'd taken someone's place, kept it sleeping. But now, it was my turn. I didn't leave the cabin after that. Not for days. I ate what I had. I didn't sleep much. I just sat with a stone in my lap, turning it over, feeling the weight of it press deeper with every hour. The sap had stopped crying beneath the floorboards. But the silence wasn't comforting. It felt like anticipation, like the forest was holding its breath. On the 7th night, I woke to find the door open. The front door, wide, swinging on its hinges. The air outside was cold and still. I should have been terrified, but I wasn't. I was calm, because I understood now. This wasn't punishment. It was inheritance. Some families passed down land or debt. Mine passed down sorrow, stacked in stone and bled through bark. So I put on my boots, picked up the stone, walked back to the woods. The cairn was already there, 6 stones tall, waiting. The sap glistened beneath it, like a mirror. I didn't hesitate. I placed the 7th stone gently at the top. It sank a little, like the cairn accepted it. Then behind me, the trees whispered. And I knew I'd bought time. Not for me, for whoever comes next. I sold the cabin a month later. moved far west where the trees are different and the stones don't remember my name. But every once in a while, when I'm walking alone, I catch a smell on the wind, sweet metallic. And sometimes, if I pass a rock balanced just a little too perfectly, I feel something beneath my skin. Shift. A pulse. A whisper. A reminder. That sorrow stacks itself. And memory always finds its shape, even in stone. Story 6. The Cave That Screamed. People in town called it the Screamer's Mouth. You wouldn't find it on a map. It sat somewhere off the edge of Gray Hollow, where the forest turned black with pine and the soil crumbled beneath your boots like ash. Even the deer avoided it. Hunters marked it in red on their personal maps, not to track game, but to remind themselves where not to go. I wouldn't have gone either if it weren't for my brother. He disappeared 6 years ago. No note, no goodbye. Just walked into the woods and never came back. The only clue was a photo he'd left on my doorstep 2 days before, a blurry shot of a cave entrance deep in the trees. Narrow, tall, twisted like a scream, frozen mid-echo. On the back in his handwriting were 3 words, "It's finally calling." Nobody believed me when I showed them. Said it was a prank, said he'd just wandered too far. But I knew my brother. He wasn't the type to vanish. He wasn't the type to chase myths, unless they were real. I kept the photo in a drawer for years, too scared to follow it. But something changed last fall. I started hearing noises, not voices exactly, breaths, long-strained, drawn through stone, sometimes in my dreams, sometimes in waking silence, always from just outside the house, like something waiting, calling. So last week I packed a bag, left a note, and drove out to Gray Hollow. It didn't take long to find the trail. No signposts. Just a break in the underbrush where the trees leaned away like they were recoiling. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. No birdsong, no wind. Just the crunch of my boots and the growing pressure behind my ears, like the forest was trying to hold in a sound it didn't want me to hear. And then I saw it. The cave. Exactly like the photo. Tall, crooked mouth-like. The rock around the entrance was stained dark as if it had been crying for years. I didn't step inside. Not yet, but I swear, as I stood there staring at it, it breathed. I don't remember deciding to go in. One moment I was standing there, heart-pounding breath fogging in the still air, and the next my boots were inside, swallowed by shadow. The light behind me shrank fast. The entrance collapsed into black, and the only sound was the soft crunch of my steps over dust and stone. I clicked on my headlamp. The beam cut through the dark, but barely. The cave seemed to swallow light as fast as I could cast it. The walls were slick-veined with quartz, and something darker, something that pulsed if I looked too long. I told myself it was condensation. That's what I wanted to believe. The passage narrowed quickly. I had to duck, then crawl. At one point, I squeezed through a crack so tight, I scraped skin off both shoulders. My breath got louder with each inch forward. Not just from the exertion, something about the way sound moved down there, like every exhale echoed and returned, heavier, warped. About 100 feet in, I heard it. A low moan, distant, echoing. It didn't sound human. It didn't sound animal either. It was something raw, elemental. Like the cave itself was groaning an ancient complaint buried for centuries, and finally too tired to hold its silence. I paused. Turned off my lamp. Bad idea. The moment the light died, I felt movement. Not air, movement. Like the walls shifted closer, the floor seemed to rise. I felt watched not from behind or above, but from within. Like the stone had eyes, and they had always been open. I flicked the light back on fast. And that's when I saw the handprint. Pressed into the wall just ahead of me, fingers long and deep, like something had melted through the rock. 5 digits, human-shaped, still wet, dripping with what looked like black sap, but thicker. Coagulated. It pulsed. I reached toward it. I don't know why. And then from deeper in the tunnel, I heard something that froze me in place. My name. Whispered, drawn out in a voice like wind through teeth. Jake. No one else knew I was here. No one alive, anyway. I backed up. And that's when I saw the carving on the cave wall just to my left, half buried in dust. Not a symbol. Not some ancient rune. Just 2 words etched in shaky block letters. He's here. Underneath a tiny rusted item was wedged into a crack. My brother's compass, still ticking, still warm, still pointed deeper. I stared at the compass for what felt like minutes, but could have been hours. It was my brother's, no doubt. The cracked face, the worn leather strap, he never went hiking without it. Mom gave it to him when he turned 16. I remember being jealous. I'd wanted one too. And yet, the moment I touched it, something cracked open behind my eyes. A memory that didn't belong to me. I saw him, kneeling right where I stood. His hands were trembling. His face was streaked with dust and blood, and he was whispering no pleading to the cave itself. Not praying, begging. His words didn't make sense at first, but they echoed through me as clearly as if I'd said them myself. It didn't want me. It wanted the one who remembers. Jake, I'm sorry. My breath caught. I stumbled backward, clutching my head dizzy from the surge of impossible memory. That image, my brother on his knees apologizing to me, it hadn't come from my own recollection. It had come from the cave. It was showing me what it had taken. Or worse, what it had been given. And then I realized something else. This wasn't the first time I'd come here. Flashes, sensory fragments flickered in my mind. The cold grip of the tunnel, the smell of copper and wet moss, a handprint, mine, burned into stone. A scream that never ended just looped inside the dark, like a song that had forgotten its last note. The cave knew me. It always had. I dropped the compass. The tick, tick, tick suddenly felt mocking, like a countdown I hadn't realized was running out. And that's when I heard the laughter. Soft at first, then rising in pitch, echoing from deeper within, childlike familiar. Not joyful, not manic, lonely. I turned slowly, lamp trembling in my grip. At the edge of the light stood a figure. Silhouette. Same build as mine, same shape. But something was wrong. Its mouth was wide open, like it had been frozen mid-scream, not in pain, in silence. No sound came out, but I could feel the scream vibrating in my chest. It tilted its head. It mirrored my movement exactly, like a reflection. My hand raised. So did his. I whispered, "Ben," it smiled. And I saw etched into its cheeks, just under the skin, words carved like branding scars, "Trade complete." And beneath that faint but visible, the wrong brother came back. I stumbled backward, the scream trapped behind that thing's smile, threatening to detonate in my skull. My headlamp flickered once, then dimmed. The batteries hadn't died. It was the cave. It was suppressing light like it was hungry for darkness. The figure moved again, not toward me, with me. Every step I took backward, it mirrored stepping forward, like we were tethered, like one of us couldn't move without dragging the other deeper. I bolted, turned and ran scraping shoulders against narrow rock walls, breath slicing in and out in ragged bursts. But no matter how far I ran, the path didn't change. It looped. Familiar formations, familiar carvings. I passed the same split stone arch 3 times. That thing, my reflection, was always just behind me, not chasing, following, like it belonged. The scream started then, not a human sound. The cave itself began to howl, not through echo or airflow, but through its bones. The walls vibrated. Dust rained from the ceiling. The floor rippled like breath through lungs, like the entire cave was alive, sick, ancient, starving, and mourning. And beneath the scream, something else rose, whispers, hundreds of them, names, dates, pleas, laughter, warnings. Don't trade what you can't return. I was supposed to forget Jake. You weren't meant to come. Then one voice louder than the rest, take it back. I stopped cold. Before me a chamber, natural but carved as if dug by something with purpose. In the center, a pedestal of stone, slick with that black sap. And resting atop it, my brother, or what remained of him, mummified but not by time, by choice. His eyes open, lips cracked, hands outstretched like he'd been reaching for something as he died, or was kept alive. His mouth moved, barely. A whisper escaped like air through a flute. Too late. Then the thing, my mirror, stepped into the chamber beside me, and I understood. This wasn't about rescue, it was about balance. One brother in, one brother out. The cave had held him until it could claim the right one. Me. The moment I accepted that the air shifted, my reflection smiled, raised its hand again, and slowly, deliberately pressed its palm into mine. It was cold, smooth, hollow. And as our hands met, he began to scream, not out loud, not in sound, but inside me. A scream that tunneled through my chest like an earthquake through bone. I saw flashes, my brother's last moments crawling through the dark, bargaining with the cave, offering his soul to spare mine. He'd traded himself to hold back something worse. And now the debt had come due. The scream didn't stop. It burrowed deeper, digging tunnels through my memories, my thoughts, myself. Couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The reflection, the thing that wore my shape, was no longer beside me. It was inside me. And then, silence. The pressure lifted, the cave exhaled, and I was alone. The chamber was empty. No pedestal, no corpse, no carvings, just stone damp and still. My headlamp flickered back to life, steady now. The passage behind me was open wide, inviting, as if the cave was finished. I walked out without resistance. Sunlight hit my face. I blinked into it, half expecting to wake up on my bedroom floor drenched in sweat. But I didn't. I stood at the mouth of the cave, alone. A week passed, then 2. I said nothing to anyone. Didn't tell the police, didn't go back. I tried to write it off as a breakdown, a hallucination, some long-buried guilt manifesting as madness. But then I found something in my bag, a compass. My compass, not Ben's. Same crack, same worn strap. But the initials carved on the back weren't mine. BL. And worse, the needle spun freely, directionless. I checked the mirror that night just to be sure. Same face, same eye. But something off. A smile I didn't remember giving. A silence behind my stare like I was looking through the glass, not at it. Sometimes I hear it, late at night, when everything's still. Not a scream exactly. Not anymore. Just breathing. Just waiting. The cave doesn't forget. It only lets you leave when it already has what it wants. And sometimes, it wants you to bring it back out. Story 7. The Polaroid of the Man Without Eyes. I found the photo in my grandmother's attic the week after she died. It was buried in a cedar box beneath stacks of yellowed newspaper clippings and brittle prayer cards, most of them dated before I was born. The box smelled like mold and lavender, a scent that hit me with a wave of nostalgia and unease. My grandmother never let me up here as a kid. She used to say some memories stay in the dark for a reason. But now she was gone, and the dark was mine to sort through. The Polaroid was near the bottom, wrapped in wax paper, as if it were fragile or dangerous. I remember holding it in my hands, confused by what I saw. At first glance, it looked like any old snapshot from the 70s, grainy, overexposed edges curled with time. But the subject, it was a man, standing at the edge of a dense Appalachian tree line. He was wearing a long, dark coat. His posture was rigid, almost unnatural, like he'd been caught mid-motion and frozen by the flash. But what struck me most, but still turns my stomach when I think about it, were his eyes. He didn't have any. No sockets, no shadows. Just a blur where they should have been, as if the camera had failed to register that part of his face, or refused to. I showed it to my mother. She went pale the moment she saw it. "Where did you get this?" she asked, voice shaking. "Grandma's attic," I said. Why, she didn't answer. Just took it from me and slid it into the fireplace. I tried to stop her, but the flames caught instantly, like the photo had been waiting to burn. Neither of us said a word after that. But that night, I dreamed of the man, standing outside my bedroom window, head tilted, face blank, watching. And in the dream, I wasn't a child. I was exactly who I am now. I tried to forget about the photo, but 3 nights later, it returned. I was cleaning out the kitchen junk drawer, looking for batteries, I think, when my fingers brushed something stiff and smooth beneath an old phone book. I pulled it out. It was the Polaroid. Same grain, same weathered edges, same man in the coat standing in the same spot at the edge of the trees. And still, no eyes. I dropped it like it was burning. My first thought was that my mom had made a copy, but that didn't make sense. She burned the original. I saw it blacken and curl in the fire, saw it crumble to ash. Yet here it was again, unchanged. No scorch marks, no wrinkles, no smell of smoke. I called her. She didn't answer. Instead, my phone buzzed with a text a few minutes later. "Don't show it to anyone. Bury it. Somewhere far." I stared at the screen for a long time. My heart was pounding, not from fear exactly, but from something deeper, like recognition, like guilt I didn't understand yet. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the man in the picture, his blank face, the way his head tilted slightly, as if he were listening. I tried to distract myself, music, TV, anything, but my eyes kept drifting to the nightstand, where the photo sat again. I hadn't moved it, hadn't even touched it since I dropped it in the drawer. But now it was upright, propped perfectly against the lamp. And this time, it was different. Same man, same forest, but he was closer, only a few feet from the camera. I could see the folds in his coat, the shine on his shoes, and though his eyes were still missing the blur where they should have been, shifted when I moved the photo, like it was tracking me. The next day, I dug a hole behind the church on Carson Hill, an old patch of land nobody touched anymore. I dropped the photo in and covered it fast, said a prayer I barely remembered from childhood, and didn't look back. That night, I heard footsteps in my attic. Slow, deliberate. I live alone. When I opened the hatch to check, nothing was there, just dust and silence. Except Pinned to the inside of the attic door with a rusted nail was another Polaroid. Same man, same forest, now only a few inches away from the lens, and scrawled in jagged fading ink across the bottom border, "You remember now." I left the attic door open after that. There was no point pretending the house was mine anymore. Every room felt watched. Every mirror turned subtly inward like the angles had shifted when I wasn't looking. And the photo, it wouldn't stop changing. Each day I found it somewhere new under my pillow inside the refrigerator, once even taped to the steering wheel of my car. Always the same man, always closer. His eyeless face now just a breath away from the lens. The blur in place of eyes had started to pulse like the camera had captured motion. Or life. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. All I could think about was that name on the bottom of the latest Polaroid, "You remember now." But I didn't. Not yet. Then I remembered something strange from my childhood. A night when my grandmother had tucked me in, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "If he ever returns, it means the debt skipped a generation." I'd asked what she meant. She told me it was just a dream. Now I wasn't so sure. I drove to my mother's house. She didn't answer the door, but it wasn't locked. I found her in the kitchen surrounded by old photo albums and torn black and white prints. Her eyes were bloodshot, her hands shaking. "He's back," I said. She didn't ask who. She just nodded. Then pulled something from the drawer. Another Polaroid. But this one was older. Faded the white edges, yellowed with time. The same man, the same woods. But this time, he wasn't alone. A child stood beside him. A boy no more than 6. Wearing my favorite red jacket from when I was a kid. "That's you," my mom whispered. "You saw him once before, you just forgot." My mouth went dry. "I don't remember." "You're not supposed to." That was part of the deal. The Polaroid takes the memory, stores it, seals it until the debt calls again. I didn't want to believe her. But the feeling in my gut, the one that had been growing since I first found the photo, wasn't fear. It was recognition. Deep, primal. Like seeing your own reflection blink out of sync. "We thought it ended with your grandfather," she continued. "He made the first trade. Sight for safety. Every generation, the man without eyes comes to collect. But if the next in line forgets..." She trailed off, and I finally asked the question I'd been too afraid to say out loud. "What happens when the memory comes back?" Her eyes filled with tears. "You stop being you." I don't remember driving home. One minute I was in my mother's kitchen hands, shaking, mind reeling. The next, I was standing in my hallway door, ajar behind me. Polaroids scattered like breadcrumbs at my feet. Dozens of them, hundreds maybe. Each one a moment I didn't remember. Me in a treehouse I never climbed. Me holding a birthday cake I never received. Me asleep in a car I don't own. And always, in the corner in the shadow, the man. Watching, getting closer. My breathing was ragged. I turned in a slow circle, heart hammering, as I realized every surface in the room reflected me. Every window, every framed photo, every black screen. But the reflections weren't right. In each one I was just a little off. Smiling when I wasn't. Tilting my head when I was still. And behind each of me, a shape. Tall, dark, head cocked. No eyes. The man wasn't just in the photo anymore. He was in me. Or worse, I had always been part of him. I stumbled toward the bathroom mirror, needing something concrete, something real. I flicked the light on and stared at myself and watched as I blinked, out of sync with my reflection. No. My fingers trembled as I reached toward the mirror, My reflection reached back, but it didn't mirror me. It anticipated me, moved first, smiled wider, and then whispered, though no mouth moved, "You took his place." Suddenly, I remembered everything. I was 6, running through the woods behind my grandmother's house. I found the man there, not just standing, but waiting. And I'd made a deal. Not a child's game, not imagination. A real deal. My fear for protection, my voice for silence, my memory for survival. He'd given me this life. He'd taken the other part to the real part. And now, it was time to return it. The mirror cracked from the center outward webbing across the surface like frostbite. My reflection stayed still as I stepped back. Didn't follow. Just watched. And behind the glass, the man began to emerge. Not stepping through, but rising within me, like the photo had never shown him. But captured him, contained him, and now I had freed him. The Polaroid on my dresser flared bright white and then turned black. Pitch black, blank, like a negative burned to nothing. And in that emptiness, I saw a new image forming. My face, my eyes, gone. I don't know how long I sat there. The mirror was shattered. My reflection gone. My hands didn't feel like mine anymore. They moved too slow, too steady, like they'd forgotten how to tremble. When I looked down, the lines on my skin had deepened. Not aged, emptied. I tried to scream. Nothing came out. Just a rasp of breath like wind dragging over cold stone. The house was still. But something had shifted in the air, like the space around me had thickened, grown aware. I moved through the rooms in silence, the lights flickering as I passed. On my nightstand sat one final Polaroid. Still warm, I picked it up with fingers that barely obeyed. It was a photo of my bedroom taken from the hallway just outside the door. The light inside was dim, the angle tilted. At first it seemed empty, but in the corner, a figure, standing still, watching, wearing my clothes, wearing my face, except for the eyes. They were gone. 2 blank smears where I should have been looking back. And across the bottom, freshly inked in wet black scrawl, "Your turn." I dropped the photo and turned slowly toward the hallway. A child was standing there, eyes wide, breath shallow, holding something in her hand. A camera, the kind that clicks and whirs and spits out truth. She didn't speak, just lifted it toward me, hesitant but drawn, like something unseen had guided her here. I wanted to warn her, wanted to tell her to run to bury it, to forget me before it was too late. But my mouth didn't move, it just smiled. And somewhere deep inside me, a flashbulb bloomed white as the camera clicked, and the man without eyes found his next frame. Thank you for venturing into the darkness with us. If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't keep the fear to yourself. Leave a comment, smash that like button, and share this video with someone who dares to listen in the dark. We release terrifying true stories every week, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's lurking in the shadows. This is High Scare Stories, where nightmares don't end when the video does. Until next time, stay safe and stay scared.